so I'm just going to wing this. Is that okay with you?
That's fine with me.
Perfect. Okay, so this is Brian Dressel and Nick Friedemann, former co-host of After the Hype. Hi, Nick.
Hi, how are you?
I'm doing wonderful. How is Canada?
Fucking snowy. It snowed yesterday, all day.
That's exciting. So it's like 80 degrees here.
Oh, you son of a... It's probably going to continue snowing for like a month, by the way.
That's what you get for living north of the wall.
I know, it's true.
So for those of you who are not familiar with After the Hype, that's totally fine. You can check us out. You probably found us in the same feed, either on Spotify or iTunes or something like that, which is awesome that we're on Spotify now. Still very excited about that. But essentially, back in the day, Nick turned me on to a little show called The Venture Brothers, and I have been wildly obsessed with it ever since. I knew a little bit before Nick and I were friends, because it came out way before I met him, but I didn't really start watching it until he turned me onto it. So when I thought about starting a new podcast about The Venture Brothers, he was obviously the first person I reached out to.
Yeah.
Nick, where did you come to Venture Brothers from?
Bizarrely, I came to it also through somebody else. They showed me... you remember Sean, right?
Yeah, of course.
Okay. Sean basically showed me the second season midway through. I think the first episode I ever saw was and I can't remember the name of it, but it's the part 2 episode that never has a part 1.
Okay.
Which is the weirdest one to start with, because I was like, I can't wait to watch the first episode of this 2-parter. Never saw it. And I was just like, this show is amazing. Like, I can't believe that something like this exists that's making fun of so many things that I watched as a kid, but at the same time also really embracing them in a loving way.
Oh, yeah. So, like, they really love their source material.
Yeah, exactly.
It's kind of insane.
It is. So I went out and bought like all the DVDs and everything and just went from there and just like continued to watch it.
I mean, that's kind of like specifically with today's episode. So what we're going to be doing is going through every single episode of Venture Brothers. Each episode will hopefully be around a half hour. We'll see how it goes. But I never came to, since we're starting in the beginning, which is the very best place to start, I never saw the first episode until after I'd finished, I want to say, season 4 or 5.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, like it was very late because I always had been told by other Venture Brothers fans that the first episode is technically the second episode, and if you really want to watch the rough pilot, you can, but it's not very good.
Yep.
Yeah, they were not wrong.
No.
So today's episode will be all about that episode, which is The Terrible Secret of Turtle Bay, which is the best part of the entire episode is the title, I think.
Yeah.
It's still a really fun episode to talk about, and there's a ton of Easter eggs in there that come to play later in the show, which is really cool.
For sure.
For fans, it's fun to dive into it, even if it's not one that's going to make you laugh, I don't think. But I still think it's a fun one to dive into.
Yeah, I think this is something you would probably watch only if you would, like you said, I mean, you came to it very late. I think that's probably the time to come in to see that the world building's already there, but they really didn't have a strong grasp of many of the characters besides maybe Brock Sampson and the Monarch.
And even Brock Sampson's kind of a one note, like, I just kill people. And
exactly. The
Monarch is like way more stoic and not fun, and he's just kind of a pain in the ass, and the kids are just such kids.
Yeah.
Like, and they still are in season 1. I mean, more so definitely than like later on in the show, but man, that first episode, it's like they're completely different characters.
Yeah, and they're basically the same, which is, I think, the hardest part about the show is, or at least that first pilot, is that you're just like, who gives a shit about these kids at all? Because there's just nothing about them to really like latch onto. They don't have a personality. They don't seem distinct from each other besides the way they look. Yeah, and like, there's just like, I want to kind of talk about like that sort of thing, because there's a lot of like White is in the episode, Professor Impossible's in the episode, Billy shows up. Really the only like Baron Underbite isn't there, but he doesn't really become a major thing till a little bit later, but they mentioned him in the actual first episode. And I'm not sure was God, did White even have a line, or does he just sit in the background? No, he does. He makes fun of the doctor. I think
that's right.
Billy doesn't have a line. Billy, I think, is just there.
I thought I might have had it back.
Maybe Billy does.
Yeah, I mean, either way. I mean, I watched these things yesterday, and like that's the thing is like I watched the second episode, which will be next week's episode, and like I'm laughing, I'm having a great time, and I remember and I'm watching this one, just going like, this is more just like an archaeological dig of like,
yeah,
hey, where did these things come from?
Well, and what's really weird too is they don't really have the sense of humor down. Like besides the obvious stuff, like if you go and watch the episode, it's very slow. It has a lot of dead air, which is very dissimilar for a Venture Brothers show. I think generally speaking, one of the strongest things about a Venture Brothers episode is how tight they are.
Yeah, and their pacing is impeccable.
Exactly. And this episode is the opposite of that. Like it's not to like shit all over it, but it is like a very slow pilot.
Yeah.
They do a good job with world building, but man, that's about it.
Yeah, because it's one of those things where like when you're watching it, it's like if it wasn't for the world building, I don't think this show would have gotten picked up.
Exactly.
Like you look at it, it's like, oh, it's pretty cool. You know, it's like a modern scientist. It's kind of like an updated Johnny Quest. That's pretty cool. Who actually comes into the show later. Yes. And it's like, yeah, there's some cool things in there, but as far as like just comedy and like characters, like it's if it stayed at this quality, we wouldn't have this podcast. Like there would have been nothing to obsess over.
Well, there probably wouldn't even be a first season.
Yeah, like it's just kind of insane. So for those of you who don't know, the first episode, the one that we're talking about today, it came out in February of 2003, and then the second episode, which will be next week's episode, came out in August of 2004. So like there was a huge chunk of time between the two of them, and I didn't watch these as they aired. I'm going off of what I found on IMDb. So if I'm wrong, please blow me up and let me know. But that was everything that I could find on it, and then really just nobody talks about this episode. So I feel we should kind of move through just like plot wise of like where it goes and kind of what we like and don't like about it, and then yeah. So do you remember like beyond just rewatching it? Do you remember the plot? If I were to say like pick a Venture Brothers episode, like the first one, can you tell me what it's about? Could you even do it?
Not without having just watched it yesterday.
Because I feel like I can do it with a lot of episodes. Like, you give me, like, a name and sometime around where it's at, and I can pretty much give you the plot. Yep. But this one is like, nope. I always remember there's a ninja who's after Dr. Venture, and you think it's for bad reasons, and you find out it's just to masturbate to his machine, which is hysterical. Yeah. Like, that is the sort of humor that later comes into play, but much faster.
Yes, and with an actual payoff. Like, it's a very... it's an odd reveal.
It is, but I still like it because it still feels very... Like, there's a lot of jokes in here. I think I even wrote one of them down that still feel very Venture Brothers. But then there's things like Brock Sampson, where it's like, Brock Sampson is a great character, and I love him. But in this one, it's just... He's just there to beat the shit out of people, which is funny, and it's great, but it's different.
Yeah.
Like the best example, before we keep moving down the plot, there's a part right in the beginning where Brock beats the shit out of some mummy and then pees on him. And it's like, as funny as that is, that's something that would never happen throughout the rest of the show.
No.
But I still find it funny. I still enjoy it. I even like the follow-up punchline that feels very Venture Brothers. Like, you have to completely discredit him, or what, I don't remember exactly how they phrased it, but you have to completely do this to totally get him to die. And he's like, oh, well, yeah, of course. It's like...
But then they have a weird tag that's like, oh, he actually wasn't a mummy, he was just a guy. And you're like, but... Oh, okay. Like, they hadn't quite worked out the formula of some of these reveals that the world is normal at times, and then the world is also very, like, embroiled in, like, Hanna-Barbera sort of mythology.
Yeah.
Because, like, comparing this episode to the one that we would do, you know, for next week, is you have similar beats, like with the Chupacabra, and it's the same kind of reveal as the mummy, but they're completely different attitudes towards them.
Oh, yeah.
It's very interesting. Like, I think that they didn't really... That joke with the peeing on the mummy, I also laughed at. And then where it revealed it's a person, you're just like, well, then okay? Like, it just didn't quite... They didn't know what joke to choose, so they chose both.
Yeah, and they just never really got to the like the humor that they later nailed down of, like, the henchmen are expendable people.
Exactly.
And, like, there's something that, like, that's kind of a rough pill to swallow if you don't really know what you're sitting down for. But in the rest of the series, like, the world is so pitch perfect that, like, they're murdering the shit out of everybody. And it's like, it's funny. You're laughing with them. And then you go to this first one, it's like, it's just kind of mean.
Yeah, exactly. Like when Brock kills... what does he kill? He kills something on the front lawn. It's not the... Oh, it's the crocodile or the alligator. And everyone's horrified, and generally speaking, like, they would usually undercut that with somebody being, which is weirdly enough what they do in the next episode, with somebody being, like, enamored with Brock. And in this, everyone's just horrified, so you're not really sure as an audience member to sympathize with Brock, or you're supposed to be horrified with the people in the show. It's weird.
Yeah, and it's kind of fun going back now that we're waiting on the next season, and we're just kind of like in this limbo area, and going back to like the beginning where it's like where Brock was like, you look at him now and it's like he's a loving father-esque figure, and you go back to the beginning and he's just murking people on the front lawn. It's just like,
honestly, like, early season Brock is my favorite Brock.
It's so much fun. Like I might not love this episode, but I still really like Brock in it. Like, it's not the same Brock, but it's still funny. It's still enjoyable.
Exactly.
Moving a little bit forward throughout the plot,
yes.
I like the I really like, more so in this episode than any other episode from here on out, this one kind of feels like in the beginning they were trying to play with the idea of Venture being good at his job.
Yes.
Like, not knowing messaging and not knowing the right time to reveal things, but still being good at designing and creating things.
Exactly. That seems super strange to me.
Yeah, like, looking at, like, from where we are now to back then with this one specifically, and I promise we won't do this with every episode of just compare it to where it is now. This one's just kind of, you can't help it. But, like, it's just kind of cool. Like, oh, yeah, for a while there, they thought Venture would be a stand-up normal dude.
Yeah.
And,
well, and to defend ourselves very briefly in that kind of category, it's really hard not to compare it against some of the other stuff because of how starkly different it is.
Yeah.
It's like going early on in the Simpsons episodes where Smithers wasn't yellow, he was like brown, which is weird to compare and contrast that to where Smithers ends up, because they just didn't know what Smithers was as a character, so they could experiment with it a little bit more. And this pilot probably wouldn't say shouldn't have been aired, but compared to the rest of it, it's so vastly different. It's hard not to just look at it and go, like, how did this become this?
Yeah, because I think you're right. I think this was and I have very, like, I'm just a fan. Like, I'm not a scholar on this stuff at all. Like, I just love it so much, and that's why I want to do this show. But, like, you look at it and it's wonderful to see the world, because you can see that was the pitch of the show, was the world. It wasn't the characters, and that's why I think the characters changed so much from episodes 1 to 2, because the boys are, like you said earlier, they're essentially the same character, they're just different looking, and then by the next episode, Hank and Dean are starkly different people.
Yes.
Which is half the joy of the show. Like, calling it the Venture Brothers in the beginning made, I think, more sense in the first couple of seasons because they were more the central point, and then throughout it becomes more of like a family ensemble thing. But in the first show, calling it Venture Brothers, it made no sense because they're basically a footnote.
Right, exactly. And like you're saying, like, the dad's, Dr. Venture's competent, and Brock is just kind of like this violent killing machine, and everyone kind of feels very flat, but that's usually the way it works in a pilot. Like, very rarely does a pilot kind of like really understand, like, is born fully formed. Like, it's almost always kind of like a learning progress. So it's, there really isn't much for character, but there's a ton of world building stuff. Like, they really do kind of establish what is the earliest parts of what is essentially the OSI, even though they call it the UN.
Yep.
Like, the idea of, like, this umbrella group that exists as good, and then you have this kind of, like, seedy underbelly, which is where the ninja guy exists, kind of, but it's definitely where the monarch exists. Like, they kind of establish that you have this umbrella, and then you have this basin. And so it kind of creates, like, this egg-y thing, and it's interesting. Like, they definitely have the world set up to where super scientists exist, blah blah, and everything feels natural. It's just so different. It's just hard to get around that.
Yeah, beyond the world building, it's just not that engaging of an episode. But I mean, there are really cool things in there. Like, I like that General Man-Hour's in there. Like, Man-Hour comes back throughout the entire show. Like, one of my favorite episodes is centered around a pitch to General Man-Hour, and it's like, it's really cool seeing him here in, like, this kind of blip speaking role in the not OSI.
Exactly.
That one was really cool, and then I thought there was another note that I took. Oh yeah, they hint at his brother in his belly.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
That part I had, like, which is such a huge part port. Oh my goodness. It's a huge part of the whole first season is just these dreams that he's having about himself and then slowly introducing more and more and more to it. I thought that was really interesting. I was surprised that existed so early on.
Yeah, I didn't never, because I remember it sprinkled throughout the first season like everyone does, but I did not remember it in the pilot. And like this, it's like a one shot, and then when he wakes up, he's like, oh, I was in the mommy place. And it's like, okay, so I could see how this is easily forgettable, but knowing where it goes, it's like, man, they had that one planned from the get-go, which I think is awesome. Like I love seeing those sorts of things, like the long shot of, because in like a pitch session they had to defend why that shot was there. So the fact they had that one planned from the very beginning, I thought was really cool.
I guess here's a question I have for you. How much, if you had to take a guess, how much do you think is planned out? Because I was doing some reading and it seems like the world had been established by... I can't remember his name. It's Doc Hammer and then Jackson Public, right?
Yeah.
How much do you... Because it's Jackson Public's brainchild, basically. Like, I feel like the impression I get from watching that episode is, okay, so the pacing isn't quite the same. Like, some of the stuff isn't quite the same. But I do feel like he had a plan for all of those characters. Like, I do feel like the skeletons of those characters existed. I just don't necessarily feel like they were as fleshed out as they were an episode later.
Yeah, I can see that. I mean... I don't know. Like I love to believe in Jackson Public because he just does such amazing things. But I have a feeling a lot of it was just kind of like pipe dreams of like, if this works, then this will work. But if it doesn't, then I don't need to go that way. So I don't know how much of it was like planned out and how much of it was happy coincidence.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, like... The casting for the show is incredible. Like, it's really surprising that they didn't really recast anybody from, say, the pilot on. Like, everybody is really, really good at what they are, which is really surprising that from the pilot they kind of had the talent set up already. But yeah, I guess you're right. I bet some of it is circumstance. Definitely the dreams are a plant. I don't think he necessarily knew what he wanted to do with the brothers yet. But you still have the Monarch. Like, you still have, seeds of what the show ends up becoming. And I guess we'll never know what was planned and what wasn't. But it's interesting to think about, at least.
And it's really cool, like, just looking at, like, the Monarch in particular, because they clearly had a totally different design on him, and Dr. Girlfriend was pretty much the same. But they didn't have... I'm totally blanking on his name now. They didn't have like 21 or 24, and the henchmen just looked totally different. But it's
even
awesome
the Monarch
because
looks totally different.
But I love that later on in the show they go back to those original suits and use it as like back in the day what they used to wear. Like I think that's a really cool thing. I'm looking up now just because I'm me. And from what I can tell, and I'm sure people would love to tell me I'm wrong on this, Doc Hammer did not work on the pilot at all.
No, I looked it up too because I was just very, very interested. But I don't think he works on an episode technically, I guess, until episode 3, which is, or I guess 2, depending on where you put the pilot. If you put the pilot as 0 or if you put it at 1. But
yeah, in the IMDb numbering, it's 0. If that helps. And then the first one is the first one.
Yeah.
Today we're episode 0. And now I'm just cruising through to see if he shows up again. And I think you're right. I don't think he shows up in the second episode either. Oh, no, he does. He does Dr. Girlfriend and Speedy from then on. So, yeah, the only episode I don't think he's in would be the one that we're talking about today.
Oh, he doesn't... Dr. Girlfriend doesn't talk, I guess, in the pilot?
She does, but her voice is totally different.
Oh, I didn't catch that.
Yeah, her voice is totally different in that one. I'm looking now to try to figure out who voiced her, and I don't see it. So maybe it was him, and I just can't find it, but I don't even see her name in the credits. I just see...
Interesting. She probably just, like, got glossed over, because if she has a line, it's a very, very quick one.
Yeah.
Like...
And it's like you look at Professor Impossible. Like, that's clearly not Stephen Colbert.
No, and it's clearly not what ends up becoming the impossible voice, because Stephen Colbert disappears after, like, season 3 or whatever.
Yeah. So Doc Hammer did work on the episode. He was the editor.
Oh, okay.
So he was clearly still there, because I thought they'd been friends for years. I just wasn't sure how much he had done. So maybe he did do the voice and just didn't get credit for it. It's possible. This is what you get for listening to an episode of just fans and not like total super nerds. But yeah, it's still just, I love looking at this sort of thing, just trying to see like how A led to B, because this one, it's like, it's, as we've been saying kind of over and over again, it's just it's more of like an educational episode instead of like, I want to have a great time laughing in an episode.
For sure. And what's really, I mean, I think like a testament to the structure of the episode is that pretty much everybody comes back except for the ninja. The ninja, I think, was just kind of like a gag for the episode, but he's kind of treated that way too, which is why I didn't love the reveal so much. Totally.
The other joke that I think was very Venture Brothers and I think landed wonderfully is the whole Monarch plan to send the meteor to the front lawn to attack everybody. Exactly. And the meteor lands on the door, and then instead of like inspecting it, like they even say, I bet you want to go check that out. I was like, nah, we don't have time, and they just leave. It's like, that is a very Venture Brothers joke. Just like, here it comes, and never mind.
Yep. That's just the end of it. There's just no, and they never cut back. Like, it's just like those henchmen are completely ignored for the rest of the episode.
And you just assume they died a horrible death, not knowing where to poop.
As most Monarch henchmen do.
But like I think that's why I still will always enjoy going back to the episode, even though like when I messaged you when we're talking about it, like, this episode's terrible. Yeah. And it's not that it's terrible is a strong word, because it's terrible in comparison to the rest of Venture Brothers, which I've told many people is my favorite show of all time. So it's like, if it's the worst slice of pizza on the pie, it's not that bad.
Exactly. It's just a soggy slice of pizza is all it is. It's still good. You know, it's just compared to the rest of the pizza that wasn't soggy, you're like, okay.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'll still eat it. It's here.
Exactly.
Is there anything, like, I'm trying to keep these episodes as tight as possible. Is there anything we haven't talked about in this one that you really think that we need to mention?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I think that there's a lot of pieces there, but I think as a whole, like, it's just... We talked about the pacing, we talked about how slow it is, we talked about how kind of the characters hadn't quite become fleshed out yet, and I think that's about it, because that's really all that... Oh, I guess one thing I did want to talk about, sorry, I'm thinking out loud a little bit, but where the boys go with the prostitute.
Oh, yeah.
That is a weird thing that keeps coming up, like, periodically throughout the show, is the boys are put into these, like, very adult situations, and their naivete kind of is just a recurring thing. Sometimes it's sexual, sometimes it's violent, sometimes it's just, you know, something that they probably shouldn't have any interest in, but they do because they're sleuths, quote unquote.
Yeah.
And it's an interesting thing that like is also brought up in the pilot. I don't think it's handled particularly well. Not that they like bundle it. It's just not that funny compared to some of the other stuff later. But I think it's interesting to kind of see the seeds of that, or at least planted, that this is what he wanted to explore in this show.
Yeah, it's very much the idea of these boy adventurers like being put into legitimate, like, horrifying situations, and they're still treating it like the Johnny Quest boy adventurer. And it's like this, I think that's kind of what brought me into Venture Brothers in the first place, of this whole like fantastical world with very real horrifying elements done in this very comedic way. And this one did that, but I agree with you, it didn't stick the landing.
Exactly.
Like, I love the payoff of Brock eventually bangs the hooker. Like, that feels very Brock, and like that worked.
Exactly.
But
right up Brock's alley.
Oh yeah. And even like the joke of I still have $300, like, 3 bills will buy you a lot. It's like it's very Venture Brothers, but it just doesn't. I think it was just a little too R-rated for the boys at that level of being naive.
Right. There's I was.
There's scaling that I feel like the scaling was off. Like, if they had gone not full blown prostitute saying have sex with me, like, I feel like there should have been middle ground that might have landed better.
For sure. There's like a quote that John Mulaney had where he was talking about his failed show, and he was basically like, after the show came out and it failed, like, people basically told me like, they liked the show, but some of the stuff that he was doing was just like not first season stuff. Like, I guess they did a body switching episode, and he was like, that's not something you do before people get to know the characters. And to me, this kind of feels like, oh, like I can see the seeds of what this becomes, but this is not necessarily something I would do before I really understand like who Hank and Dean are.
Yeah, and it's not something like as egregious as, say, like the first episode of Black Mirror of like, oh, that's a big buy-in. Like, it's not quite like that, but it is. I feel like it walks that line of like, do I really want to tune in every week to watch that?
Exactly.
Maybe, but I don't know.
Yeah, but that's why it also feels like a pilot. And then what I was trying to say earlier is that it just probably shouldn't be aired, not because it was bad, but just because it's like, oh, there's a lot of ideas. They're just not quite finely tuned. And then you go to the actual first episode and you're like, yeah, this just feels like it could have been a third season episode. This just like they figured it out. Yeah,
totally. So I think if for some reason you're listening to our show and you've never actually watched The Terrible Secret of Turtle Bay, I think if you're a fan of Venture Brothers, you wouldn't be listening to this podcast, so you'd probably enjoy it, at least for what it is. Like, you'll enjoy it to see these characters that you didn't think were important, but clearly they had plans for, because they come back. Like, there's a lot of really cool, wonderful things for Venture Brothers fans, but if you've been on the fence with Venture Brothers, or you're only kind of a casual fan, this is as skippable as they get, and in my opinion, the most skippable episode out of all 6 seasons.
100%. It's like a comedian's comedian episode. Like, don't watch it unless you're already on board. Like, you're not going to probably enjoy it if, like Brian's saying, you're coming in for the first time.
Yeah, and unfortunately, and I mean that unfortunately, now that Hulu has bought all the rights to so many Adult Swim shows and so many shows like this, they've now restructured the numbering. So number 1 is The Terrible Secret of Turtle Bay, which I think is horrible just because Venture Brothers has this weird stigma that only nerds are into it. So a lot of people don't watch it, when honestly I think it's more approachable than something like Rick and Morty.
For sure.
And Rick and Morty like gets this huge fan base, and Venture Brothers doesn't. So now that like there's more people who are getting more and more into these really ludicrous animated shows, if the first episode they go to for this one is this one and not like the rest of us, the Dia de los Dangerous, I think it'd lose a lot of extra viewers, and it's for me as a stupid Venture Brothers fan, that's heartbreaking.
It is, and you know, the only thing I can say is just steer clear until you're on maybe your second viewing. I mean, the show is unlike, I guess here's the best way I can put it. Unlike the rest of this episode is very slow and very plotting, but I think that the rest of the episodes are so starkly different. They're very quick, but in a good way. They're not like just jumping from thing to thing. There's a purposeful attitude towards everything. And this episode just meanders a lot. It doesn't really quite figure out where it wants to go or what it wants to do. And then the episode kind of ends. And there's bits that are good, but this is not a good place to start if you're looking to get into the show.
And the second episode, which we'll talk about next week, as we keep saying, does such a better job introducing everyone and everything that I think when they eventually started the show up, it was the right choice to just start with the second one and never go back to this one.
100%.
But that's really all I have to talk about for this one. Was there anything else? I think we're good.
No, I think we're good. This is... Okay. You know, I think this is all we really need to talk about.
Yeah. So we'll wrap this one up here. This is the end of first episode. I hope people enjoyed listening to it. We did kind of a shallow dive on it, but I think that's kind of fun. I just like reminiscing about how much I love this show.
It's the best show.
I mean, I like I've said before earlier in this episode and on After the Hype, if you listen to that, like Venture Brothers is my favorite show of all time. And I when I talk to people, kind of like your wife, who's like, I like it, I just don't love it. I'm like, but how? Like, it's just...
Yeah, I don't get it. But I think it's one of those things. I think here's my strategy for reintroducing Savan to it is I think that the show, bizarrely, the first 2 seasons don't really... Actually, I'll take that back. The first season has moments, but doesn't really hit its stride until the second season.
Yeah.
And I think that it's the second season where they actually flesh the world out even more, and then it becomes, like, fascinating. It just becomes this... It's like what people must have like experienced when they were in like the 80s and 14 and Dungeons and Dragons like came out, where it was like, oh shit, like that's the kind of shit that I want to devote a lot of time thinking about.
Yeah, because like after a little bit, and it takes a little bit, but I think it's partially budgetary, partially not knowing how far they can take things. The doors just get blown off this thing, and then by the time you're in seasons 4, 5, 6, it's like it's just like it can't get any crazier, and then it gets crazier, and
exactly.
And that's why I will always enjoy, even if I don't love the episode, I'll always enjoy coming back to this one because I always like seeing like humble beginnings. Like whenever I finish a season of Game of Thrones, I always watch the very first episode afterwards because I love seeing the beginning to where it goes, and I just think that's fascinating.
That makes sense. Actually, something just occurred to me very, very quickly before we start jumping into the next episode.
Yeah.
I actually think that the first season and even the second season are more about the world, and I think it's after that it becomes more about the characters. And I think that's what actually becomes really interesting, is that they're like, you know what, maybe we've taken as much of like kind of like the world as like a funny kind of thing to play with as far as it could possibly go. And if we focus on the characters existing in that world, then that becomes more of where the humor is and more of the heart and more of the body of the show.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, totally.
Sweet.
You solved Venture Brothers.
All right, that's it. I guess this is the first and last episode of this podcast.
Yeah,
right?
I guess we covered everything with that.
Ugh. Where do we go from here? Fuck.
Yeah. Okay, so I'll say that we should probably bring this one to a close here. But yeah, so we will keep dropping in the After the Hype feed. So if you're already listening to After the Hype, great. This one will pop up. If you're just showing up for our Venture Brothers show, also awesome. Thank you for doing so. Be sure to check out the other episodes. I'm not sure if any of the old episodes with Nick as a co-host After the Hype are still live. They might have had been taken down just because we have so many now.
Yeah.
Which is sad.
Good riddance.
Yeah. Yeah, back from the days when we were recording on a Nagra on the floor of my bedroom.
Yes.
Yeah, it sounds a little better now. But yeah, I look forward to the next episode. I think it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, me too.
Okay, so thank you everybody, and bye.
Bye.